holding a thick budget report, tried to persuade the king to curb his desires, Louis XIV would look at him with those proud, cold eyes and calmly utter, "Colbert, this is for the glory of France." Glory. These two words became the heaviest shackles pressing down on Colbert's head. What made him even more desperate was that, besides the endless construction, Louis XIV also developed a passion for war. He declared war on the Dutch, on the Spanish, on half of Europe. War was like a bottomless pit that could never be filled. Thousands of cannonballs, warhorses, and provisions turned into a string of shocking deficits in the account books. During a heated argument late one night, Louis XIV even publicly accused Colbert of being too stingy, obstructing his great path to becoming universal monarch. That night, Colbert walked alone in the vast, empty gardens of Versailles. The bright moonlight fell on the unfinished statues, making them look particularly pale and desolate. His heart was filled with an unprecedented sense of tearing and disillusionment. He had used all his reason to create wealth, only to watch helplessly as it was fed into the meat grinder of war. He began to question the meaning of everything he had done. Was it for the strength of the nation, or merely to satisfy one man's vanity? His body rapidly broke down in this long, silent tug-of-war. Severe stomach ulcers turned his face as pale as marble, and the pain sometimes kept him from sleeping late into the night. Yet he still refused to let go. His pride and his obsession with order compelled him to continue sitting at that desk, using his remaining life to maintain the precarious balance of the state's finances. In a rare moment of fatigue, he wrote to his son, "In the court, we are like men walking on a tightrope, a bottomless abyss below us, and our only balancing pole is those cold numbers." By the early 1680s, the storms of the era finally pushed this exhausted old man to the brink of his end. Years of continuous warfare and the endless expansion of Versailles had finally sucked dry the once wealthy foundation of France. The fiscal deficit reached an astonishing, astronomical figure. To scrape together military funds, Jean-Baptiste Colbert had to go against his original intentions and began ruthlessly increasing taxes across France. He raised the salt tax, levied a poll tax, capitation, and even imposed heavy duties on the most mundane daily tools used by the common people. This desperate measure, like drinking poison to quench thirst, plunged the already struggling French lower classes into utter despair. Scattered uprisings began to break out across the country. In the streets and alleys of Paris, the common people blamed all their hunger, pain, and resentment on this stern, unsmiling controller-general who sat in Versailles. They gave him the nickname, the Vampire of the Empire, wrote vile songs that were sung in the darkness, cursing that one day he would suffer the most terrible retribution. Meanwhile, inside the cold court, Louis XIV was gradually losing his last shred of patience for this old minister who had served him for 20 years. The younger, more radical Marquis de Louvois, who advocated for brutal warfare, gradually replaced Colbert in the king's favor. At the last cabinet meeting in 1683, facing Colbert's final, desperate attempt to dissuade him from the war budget, Louis XIV stood up in anger and threw the account book to the floor. With a memorable, cold indifference, the Sun King said to him, "Colbert, if you are too old to find gold for me, then give your place to someone who can." Those words were the final blow that shattered Colbert's spirit. He trembled as he bent down to pick up the ledger and left the council chamber, the room to which he had dedicated his entire youth. Returning home, the old man took to his bed and never rose again. Severe stomach issues and a complete mental breakdown quickly brought him to the end of his life. In his final days on his sickbed, he refused to read the letters of consolation sent by Louis XIV, even throwing one into the fire. He locked himself in his dark bedroom, letting the cold autumn rain outside beat against the window panes, alone in the silent deep night, tasting the bitter coldness that had seeped into his bones. He had spent his entire life pursuing reason and order, calculating the cost of every political maneuver, but he alone failed to foresee that the vanity of absolute monarchy is a cruel deception that would never reward him. The night is already very deep. The fog outside the window seems to be getting thicker, and the flames in the fireplace have slowly died down. The life of Jean-Baptiste Colbert was like a precise yet deeply oppressive drama. He played the coldest role on the grandest stage of France, only to take his final bow in the deepest loneliness. What he left the world was not just the foundations of French industry and the exquisite mirrors of Versailles, but also the deepest and most resigned commentary on absolute power and extreme rationality. Using the ups and downs of his own life, he proved that one person, with wisdom and a harsh order, can play the game of power in a cold court and usher in an era of prosperity. But without warmth for humanity, without the ability to distance oneself from fleeting splendor, even the mightiest empire's ledgers are just numbers written in the sand, washed away without a trace by the tide of fate. He spent his entire life finding gold for his king, only to discover at the last moment that he himself had become the greatest sacrificial victim of that very prosperity. He longed to frame the world with cold logic, but unknowingly turned himself into a marble statue devoid of warmth. Now, the glory of the Sun King, the clamor of Versailles, have all drifted away on the wind, becoming a silent tale of the past in the dust of history. In the quiet of this deep night, as we re-examine the life of Colbert, perhaps we can understand that the true value of life is not endless calculation and justification, but finding inner balance and peace. The empty title of a glorious era cannot comfort a dried-up soul. In this world, only inner gentleness and peace are the warmest anchors we have in the dark of night. The story is finished. The troubles of power, wealth, and destiny should all be put down at this moment. Let all your anxiety and exhaustion fall asleep with the dying embers of this fire. Please close your eyes, relax your breath, and let the peace of tonight gently wrap around you. Wishing you a warm, peaceful dream. Good night.